Morrison. G'day, Scott. How are you?
G'day, Graham. You sound a bit worked up, mate.
Well, I am, mate. I mean, I'm a passionate person, and I actually did find though that when people are stupid in politics, I get really upset. Now, I've never accused you of that. One thing about you is you are the consummate politician, and so I want to ask you about a few things that I read. Now, for instance,
Go for it.
Toughening up the dole when it comes to young people leaving school, etc., doesn't seem to me to be that bad an idea, but there's one weakness to it. Doesn't it just throw upon families more of a burden? Families often, in so many circumstances, are already struggling to keep going.
Well, the measures that we're trying to put through the Senate apply to only 50% of the young people in that situation. And what was found in New Zealand is they introduced this measure. They said that if you're a job-ready young person in New Zealand, which is what our measure is, then you have to wait 4 weeks before you can go on the dole. Now, in our case, that's the youth allowance other. Now, what they found is 40% of the young people in that situation didn't end up going on the dole. Now, that's a good thing. That's the backup to why we're doing what we're doing, because we're also investing more in getting young people into work. We're actually investing more than we're saving in this measure through a whole range of different job preparation programs. But you also need I think the stick as well as the carrot. And that means that, if you're job ready, then you don't get just to go straight onto the dole, and we don't want you to go straight from the school gate to the Centrelink front door.
No, I can understand that, but as I said, I do worry about where families stand on this. Last week on this show, I interviewed Adam Creighton, who is a brilliant young man, a journalist who writes for the Australian, but above all else, he's an economist. Now, he's certainly not a politician. He just deals in pure economics.
No, I think that's clear.
Exactly. I mean, I'm not sure too many people would vote for him, but nonetheless, he makes good points. So I have him on quite regularly because I'm always fascinated by what he has to say. And the one point he makes is that if we're to seriously tackle debt and deficit, runaway welfare bills and runaway health bills and all the rest of it, we have to start looking at the family home. Is it ever going to be possible to at least use a small percentage of its value to try and do something about where we are on welfare?
No, I don't see that as part of the solution here. I mean, let me tell you what the problems that I'm seeking to address. We have now 54 different supplements and 20 different payments. Now, this is a very complex system. It's even more complex than when you were responsible for it. It costs $154 billion a year, and that's going to be north of $180 billion in 10 years' time, or even, sorry, it's $270 billion in 10 years' time, and by the end of the budget and forward estimates, it's over 180. So, I mean, the growth in the expenditure here is driven by population and all of those sorts of things, but of the widening area of eligibility for payments. And so we need to get that under control. We need to get the system more simple, and we need to get it more manageable. And that's where my focus has been, and that's what Patrick McClure said when he released his report earlier this year. And I've been using that as quite a guide as to how we can reform the welfare system, make it sustainable, but make it effective. I mean, we spend $154 billion. My first job is to make sure that we spend that better than we are now, because 8 out of 10 income taxpayers go to work every day to pay for that bill.
Yeah, I understand, having been there and done that, I understand the depth and the breadth of the problem. How you actually fix it is another matter entirely. Now, one of the areas that just has had massive growth, it was growing when I was there, and I stopped being the Minister for Social Security at the end of 1991, so it's quite some time ago, sadly. But when I think back to it, what I remember is that that disability pension, that just keeps growing at a massive rate. Now, where are we up to on that? Have you been able to stem the growth even a little bit, or is it still going up on a ridiculous high?
No, we have actually, and the number of people on the disability support pension is now falling. That's what we've been able to achieve, and we've been able to get that under control with a range of measures, and I think we'll continue to be able to improve on that performance. And similarly, we're starting to get, with the measures we're proposing on family tax benefits, to get that under control, and I've been working with the crossbench on those issues, and just like we re-engineered quite a number of measures from the first budget on the pension and to get them in a format that could be supported by the Parliament. I've been working hard on those issues on family tax benefits as well. So, look, it is about trying to manage and control the growth, and because if you don't, then you end up with a system you can't afford and it swallows the budget. And that's why, as a social services minister, you also end up being a fairly important economic minister, because it is more than a third of the federal budget, and that's what you have to try and cope with. But on the DSP, particularly, you know, now we have these reforms in place that require to go to a government doctor, and the regular and the review of people's eligibility when they're younger. That is starting to show some good results, and we will continue to work on the compliance.
Well, can I just ask you that, on that score? Now, because I know I raised this with you months ago, and I always like to follow up. Sometimes that can be annoying for people like yourself, but I like to follow up. Now,
never.
What I got irritated about, and what I know millions of Australians were irritated about, is seeing these evil people over there in Syria running around, you know, with guns, killing people and knives, hacking heads off, etc., and boasting about it on television or on Facebook and showing photos of their kids, you know, in horrible circumstances. How is it possible that they were ever on the dole, and have we done anything about the doctors that signed off for them being on the dole?
Well, I can't really comment too specifically on any sort of pending investigations or anything like that, Graham. But the thing about those who were on those payments, there is an automatic system that we have in place on portability, which means those, as soon as they're out of country after 4 weeks, I believe it is, they just cut out anyway.
Yeah, no, but that's not my point. My point is, how did they get on it?
No, I know you're making the point about the doctors.
When they left, how did they get on it?
Sure. Well, what we've done is make sure that people have to go to government doctors. What you're talking about is pursuing a potential criminal action on behalf of a doctor who might have engaged in fraud. Now, you wouldn't expect me to comment on those types of investigations because I wouldn't want to compromise any of them. But suffice to say, the issue was well raised with me, Graham, and we're not unaware. You're not sitting on your hands, is that what you're telling me? Have you ever known me to do that?
No, I haven't. That would be out of character. Sometimes I wish you would, by the way, but we'll get to that in a moment. Now, by the way, when you said then, I note your comment, you're you know, negotiating, liaising with the backbench. You haven't hired someone on 150 grand to do it for you. You're doing it yourself, eh?
Of course I do. But, I mean, I have a great staff as well who work with me on this, and, you know, we've had some success with the measures I've dealt with in the past in both this portfolio and the last. But you know, but you've been in the Senate. It's a special place. There's a lot of relationships, and you just work on those relationships and, you know, listen to people.
Yeah, I know. I never had the numbers there either. It's very frustrating at times, and it can get very difficult. Now, Jackie Lambie's comments about her son are quite extraordinary. I don't agree with some comments today in the newspapers that I've read criticising her for it. I thought it took some courage, and frankly, if we don't start to admit these things, then we're going to get nowhere. I'm doing a special on ICE, which I can announce will probably be on the 2nd of September. I've spoken to a whole lot of people. I've got 2 more interviews to conduct next week, and then we'll edit it and get it to air. But what I've found in my investigations is quite extraordinary. But one of the things I can say is that in New South Wales, there are only, you know, in numbers in the few hundred, the beds you can go to in rehab facilities. This is going to require massive expense, and I just wonder where it comes from, because it doesn't seem to me that government, state or federal, are going anywhere near it. I know this week the New South Wales government made an announcement about a couple of new places to go, but I mean, it's so small compared to a massive growing problem. What are we going to do about it?
Well, you're right about the growing problem. As I understand it, of methamphetamine use, ICE was, you know, at the start of this decade around 20%. It's now over half, or around about half, and it's growing. And you've only got to. And the thing about ICE is, it touches pretty much every corner of our community. And one of the things that really worries me about it is you often find it in a lot of regional communities. And Michael McCormick, who's a really good member from the Riverina, and Wagga is, you know, he's the centre of his electorate. He was sharing with us just this week about what was happening with ICE in his own community. I was on the south coast of New South Wales on the weekend, and you're in communities, and you can tell when someone's on ICE and they're scratching their skin and all of those sorts of things, and they're living next door to pensioners and people who are quite vulnerable. So the consequences of this are just horrific. Now, we've had an interim report that has come from Ken Lay to the government about a whole range of measures that we'll have to put in place and work with the states. But it is going to have to be a whole of government and between tiers of government response, because it is a barbecue stopper, but for all the right reasons, it is something that I think is of great concern. And as law enforcement, there is early intervention, there are health issues, there is dealing with it once it's taken a hold of someone. I mean, I'm advised that this thing can be used sometimes for some years before it escalates to the more acute phase, but it can also happen far more quickly.
It can happen in a matter of weeks.
It's very accessible. It can, Graham. So there's no script on this, and it is concerning Australians all around the country, and I'm one of them. It's happening in my community, it's happening in the community where my friends and family live, and I don't think there's a politician in this place who hasn't got this high on their agenda.
There's no doubt about it. I just hope it gets higher. I'm really concerned about this. And
sure.
Mate, I just suggest watch the show on the 2nd of September. It's going to be worth watching. As always, Scott, thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
No worries, Graham. It's good to be with you.
Good on you, mate.